Welcome to Instituto Cervantes and to this very special event where we are celebrating the final activity of the cultural program commemorating the centenary of the birth of the Spanish poet Ángel González, born in 1925. Today we are presenting a book that brings together a selection of 7 poems by Ángel González, translated into English, and for the first time into 4 Indian languages: Bengali, Hindi, Marathi, and Urdu. This has been possible thanks to the great work of the translators, who we will meet shortly, but this publication also seeks to evoke the poetry of Ángel González through its design and visual elements. For this, we are fortunate to count on the illustration of Anusha Daban. I cannot see Anusha over there. And the careful work of the design village team. This evening, we will listen to and enjoy the poetry of Ángel González in different languages, and we will pay tribute to the professionals behind the production of a book, a complete process that makes the experience of reading more beautiful, more holistic. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite our director, Ms. Maria Gil Burman, to come to the stage to honor us with a few words about what this project represents for Instituto Cervantes, New Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for joining us today at this event, which holds great significance for the Instituto Cervantes, for myself, for several reasons. First, it marks the end of the multiple activities dedicated to the poet and critic Ángel González, an essential voice in contemporary Spanish poetry who would have turned 100 this year. It is also deeply moving for us to make it possible for his verses to reach for the very first time many Indian readers in their native languages, to see his words transformed into beautiful scripts such as in Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, and Bengali is, for those of us used to a single alphabet, like witnessing a small work of art. Throughout this year, tributes to Ángel González have taken place across Spain and beyond. Commemorations often serve to revive the memory of people or events that may have faded with time. Yet, in Ángel González's case, there has been nothing to bring back, because he has never been forgotten. His voice remains alive, cherished, and read even among younger generations. And I dare say that in the times we live in, his voice is essential. Behind his poetry stands a figure of honesty, humanity, and intelligence. His words allow readers to recognize where the victors, where the winners are, where the defeated, the losers, and what they feel, and most importantly, where dignity is found. The selection of poems was not easy, but they reflect themes that are characteristic of his work. Ángel González speaks of love, but never sentimentally. Love is transformative. It is the highest emotion. He speaks of death, grave and inevitable, yet without sorrow. He speaks of defeat, as I told before, but also of dignity. He speaks of human evil, from which even beasts could learn. He speaks of war and pain, survivors, but without resentment. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Isabel Pérez Gálvez who has guided this project with extraordinary care and affection, supporting all those who have participated. Akshaya, thank you very much. Translators, the Design Village team, illustrator. Truly, without her, this book would not have been possible. The title of the book, I Listen to Your Silence, comes from one of Ángel González's most celebrated love poems. It is a beautiful poem, one that allows us to imagine the relationship between two people who had the fortune to meet and love one another. I hope you enjoy the book, the illustrations, and the conversations. Thank you very much. I'm going to read now the poem which I mentioned before, no? It is called Me Basta Así. Si yo fuese Dios y tuviese el secreto, haría un ser exacto a ti. Lo probaría a la manera de los panaderos cuando prueban el pan, es decir, con la boca. Y si ese sabor fuese igual al tuyo, o sea, tu mismo olor y tu manera de sonreír, y de guardar silencio, y de estrechar mi mano estrictamente, y de besarnos sin hacernos daño, de eso sí estoy seguro. Pongo tanta atención cuando te beso. Entonces, si yo fuese Dios, podría repetirte y repetirte, siempre la misma y siempre diferente, sin cansarme jamás del juego idéntico, sin desdeñar tampoco la que fuiste, por la que ibas a ser dentro de nada. Ya no sé si me explico, pero quiero aclarar que si yo fuese Dios, haría lo posible por ser Ángel González, para quererte tal como te quiero, para aguardar con calma a que te crees tú misma cada día, a que sorprendas todas las mañanas la luz recién nacida con tu propia luz y corras la cortina impalpable que separa el sueño de la vida, resucitándome con tu palabra, Lázaro alegre, yo, mojado todavía de sombras y pereza, sorprendido y absorto en la contemplación de todo aquello que en unión de mí mismo recuperas y salvas, mueves, dejas abandonado cuando luego callas. Escucho tu silencio, oigo constelaciones, existes, creo en ti, eres, me basta.
Thank you, Maria. We know that this is a very special moment for you. Ángel González was the godfather of our director, so we can feel it. Now, I would like to invite the translators of the project to come to the stage to read the poem Me Basta Así. It is enough for me in their languages. We will begin with Devika Bakshi, journalist, teacher at Instituto Cervantes, and the translator of the poems from Spanish into English. Thank you, Devika. The floor is yours.
It's enough for me. If I were God and held the secret, I would make a being exactly like you. I would test it in the way that bakers test their bread, that is, with my mouth. And if the taste were the same as yours, that is, your same smell and your way of smiling and of being quiet and of squeezing my hand tightly and of kissing without hurting, of this I'm sure. I pay such attention when I kiss you. Then, if I were God, I could remake and remake you, always the same and always different, never tiring of that identical game, nor spurning what you were for what you would soon be. I'm no longer sure I'm making sense, but I want to be clear that if I were God, I would do everything possible to be Ángel González, so I could love you as I love you, and wait patiently for you to make yourself each day, for you to surprise every morning the newborn light with your own, and to draw the imperceptible curtain that separates dreams from life, resurrecting me with your voice, happy Lazarus, while I, still damp with shadow and sloth, surprised and engrossed in contemplating all that which, together with myself, you revive and salvage, move, leave abandoned when later you fall silent. I listen to your silence. I hear constellations. You exist. I believe in you. You are. It's enough for me.
It's time for the Bengali version. For this, we are pleased to have with us Subro Bandyopadhyay, poet, translator, and also teacher. We are very lucky at Instituto Cervantes, who will read the Bengali translation of Me Basta Si. I know there are some Bengali speakers in the audience. I hope you will enjoy it.
Before reading, I just want to tell you one thing about Ángel González that we all must know. In the contemporary poetry scenario, poetry is something of a clan. It's clannish, it's a group culture. Only poets read poets and their friends. But Ángel González was probably the last Spanish poet who was present in the middle-class Spaniards' bookshelf. এভাবেই আমার জন্য যথেষ্ট। যদি আমি ঈশ্বর হতাম আর আমার কাছে গোপন রহস্য থাকতো, আমি ঠিক তোমার মতোই একটি সত্তা তৈরি করতাম। আমি তা পরখ করে দেখতাম, যেমন পাউরুটিওয়ালারা পরখ করে, অর্থাৎ মুখ দিয়ে। এবং যদি সেই স্বাদ তোমার স্বাদের মতো হতো, অর্থাৎ তোমারই গন্ধ আর তোমার হাসি আর তোমার নীরব থাকার ধরন আর আমার হাত শক্ত করে ধরা আর নিজেদের আঘাত না করে চুম্বন করা, এ ব্যাপারে আমি নিশ্চিত যখন তোমাকে চুম্বন করি আমি অনেক মনোযোগ দিই। তাহলে যদি আমি ঈশ্বর হতাম, আমি তোমাকে বারবার তৈরি করতে পারতাম, প্রতিবার একই কিন্তু প্রতিবার আলাদা। একই খেলায় কখনো ক্লান্ত না হয়ে যে তুমি অতীতে ছিলে, তাকেও তুচ্ছ না করে যে তুমি ভবিষ্যতে হতে চলেছ তার জন্য। আমি জানি না বোঝাতে পারছি কিনা, তবে আমি স্পষ্ট করে বলতে চাই, যদি আমি ঈশ্বর হতাম তাহলে আমি আঙ্কেল গোনসালেস হওয়ার জন্য সব কিছু করতাম, যাতে তোমাকে ঠিক যেভাবে ভালোবাসি সেভাবেই ভালোবাসতে পারি, যাতে শান্তভাবে অপেক্ষা করতে পারি প্রতিদিন তোমাকে, তোমার নিজেকে তৈরি করার জন্য, প্রতি সকালে তোমার নিজের আলো দিয়ে নতুন জন্ম দেওয়া আলোকে চমকে দেবার জন্য, আর স্বপ্নের থেকে জীবনকে আলাদা করে দেওয়ার জন্য রাখা অদৃশ্য পর্দাটি সরিয়ে দেওয়ার জন্য, আমাকে তোমার কথায় পুনরুজ্জীবিত করার জন্য এক সুখী লাসারুস। আমি তখনও ছায়া ও অলসতায় ভেজা, বিস্মিত আর মুগ্ধ হয়ে সেই সব কিছুর দিকে তাকিয়ে থাকতাম যা আমার সঙ্গে এক হয়ে তুমি পুনরুদ্ধার করতে আর রক্ষা করতে, নাড়াচাড়া করতে, ফেলে রাখতে যখন পরে চুপ করে থেকে আমি তোমার নৈশব্দ শুনি, আমি নক্ষত্রপুঞ্জ শুনি, তোমার অস্তিত্ব আছে, আমি তোমাকে বিশ্বাস করি, তুমি আছো, এভাবেই আমার যথেষ্ট। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Unfortunately, Samir Raval, writer, poet, and translator, from Spanish into Hindi, cannot be with us this evening. But my colleague Akshaya Ganesam from the Cultural Department of Instituto Cervantes, and a key contributor to the editing of this publication. Thank you so much, Aksaya, for your rigor and follow-up. She will read the Hindi version of मैं बसता सी.
अगर मैं ईश्वर होता और भेद जानता तो बनाता अचूक तुम्हारे जैसा एक जीव, उसे जांचता ब्रेड बनाने वालों की तरह जब वे ब्रेड जांचते हैं, यानी मुंह से. और अगर वह स्वाद तुम्हारे जैसे ही होता, यानी तुम्हारी ही गंध और तुम्हारी भांति ही मुस्कुराहट, वह चुप रह जाना, वह मुझसे भींच कर हाथ मिलाना और बिना किसी विघ्न के एक दूसरे को चूमना. इस विषय पर मैं आश्वस्त हूँ. तुम्हें चूमते समय मैं बहुत ध्यान देता हूँ. तो फिर अगर मैं ईश्वर होता, मैं तुम्हें बार बार दोहरा पाता, हर बार वही व हर बार अलग, उसी समरस खेल से कभी भी बिना थके, जो तुम थी उसकी भी उपेक्षा ना करते हुए, बस कुछ ही समय में जो तुम होने वाली थी उसके लिए. अब मुझे नहीं पता कि मैं ठीक तरह से व्यक्त कर पा रहा हूँ या नहीं, पर चाहता हूँ स्पष्ट करना कि अगर मैं ईश्वर होता, जो संभव होता वो करता. आंखेल गोंसालेस होने के लिए, तुम्हें वैसे चाहने के लिए जैसे चाहता हूँ, निश्चलता से संयम बरतते हुए, ताकि तुम हर दिवस स्वयं को सृजित करो, ताकि हर एक सुबह चकित करो. नवजन्मित प्रकाश को स्वयं के ही प्रकाश से वह हटाओ उस अस्पृश्य पर्दे को जो पृथक करता है. जीवन का स्वप्न अपने शब्द से मुझे पुनः जीवित करते हुए, आनंदित लेजरस मैं, अभी भी परछाइयों व आलस्य से भीगा, विस्मित व लीन, उस सब के अवलोकन में जो मेरे ही संयोजन में तुम संभालती हो, बचाती हो, हटाती हो, परित्याग करके छोड़ती हो, जब बाद में चुप रह जाती हो. तुम्हारा मौन सुनता हूँ, श्रवण करता हूँ तारामंडल. तुम अस्तित्व में हो, तुम पर विश्वास है, तुम हो, मेरे लिए पर्याप्त है.
We now move to the Marathi language. The voice of Ángel González comes to Marathi thanks to Akshay Kale, his Spanish poet and professor of Spanish at OP Jindal Global University. Please, Akshay.
Thank you, Isabel, for that generous introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank Isabel and Akshaya for their the thankless job of coordinating this project. It's a huge task. And also, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Maria, the director of Instituto Cervantes, for giving us this opportunity to translate Ángel González. I was a callow 19-year-old when I first read Ángel González poetry. And as Shubhra rightly pointed out, he's one of those poets whom people say that, oh, you should read Ángel González, or have you read Ángel González? And then you end up reading his poetry. I remember the first poem I read was Nota Necrológica, an obituary which was written in the style of W.H. Auden, a very sarcastic, humorous poem. And also another humorous poem which I always talked about with the director, Estoy Bartók de Todo, which was an homage to Béla Bartók, the musician. But his poetry has that humorous touch, and I hope that I've done justice to the translation. I'll just read out my translation in Marathi. Let's see if you can see any difference vis-a-vis the Bengali recital. There's only one Marathi speaker. I see that is, yeah. Okay, there is my mother and there is someone else. Yes, so they're going to catch me out, because if it were just my mother, I would have been much more safer. Anyway, so here it goes. The title is, in Marathi, मला एवढंच पुरेसं आहे. जर मी देव असतो आणि मला ते गुपित माहीत असतं, तर मी तुझ्यासारखाच एक जीव निर्माण केला असता. मी तिची चाचणी घेतली असती. जशी पाव विक्रेते पावाची चव घेऊन खात्री करतात ना, तशीच, अगदी तशीच तोंडाने. आणि जर ती चव तुझ्यासारखी असती, तुझ्यासारखा सुगंध आणि तुझ्यासारखं हसणं आणि तुझ्यासारखं शांत राहणं आणि माझा हात घट्ट धरून राहणं आणि एकमेकांना न दुखावता चुंबन घेणं, आणि मी खात्रीने सांगू शकतो, मी तुझं चुंबन घेताना खूप काळजी घेतो. तर जर मी देव असतो, तर मी तुला पुन्हा पुन्हा निर्माण केलं असतं, नेहमी तसंच आणि अगदी नेहमी वेगळंच. त्या एकसारख्या खेळाचा मला कधीही कंटाळा आला नसता. तू जी काही होतीस तिला मी नाकारणार नव्हतो, कारण ती तू लगेचच काहीतरी वेगळं होणार होतीस. कदाचित नीट सांगू शकत नाही, पण मला सांगायचं आहे की जर मी देव असतो तर मी शक्य तितका प्रयत्न करून स्वतःला आंखेल गोन्सालेस बनवलं असतं. ह्यापुढेही मला तुझ्यावर तसंच प्रेम करायचं आहे जसं मी आताही करतो. शांतपणे वाट पाहायची आहे, जेणेकरून तू स्वतःला दररोज नव्याने घडवशील. दररोज सकाळी तू तुझ्या स्वतःच्या प्रकाशाने ताज्या जन्मलेल्या प्रकाशाला चकित करशील आणि मग तू स्वप्न आणि खरं आयुष्य यांच्यामधला अदृश्य पडदा उघडशील. तुझ्या शब्दाने मला पुन्हा जिवंत करून सेंट लासारुसप्रमाणे आनंदी बनवशील. मी अजून सावल्या आणि आळसाने ओलसर झालेला आश्चर्यचकित होऊन पाहतो त्या सगळ्या गोष्टींकडे ज्या तू माझ्यासोबत पुन्हा जिवंत करतेस, वाचवतेस, हलवतेस आणि नंतर कधीतरी शांतपणे सोडून देतेस. मी तुझं मौन ऐकतो, मी ऐकतो नक्षत्रांचा आवाज. तुझे अस्तित्व आहे, मी तुझ्यावर विश्वास ठेवतो, तू आहेस. मला एवढंच पुरेसं आहे. थँक्यू.
Last but not least, Ángel González in Urdu language. Madhuban Rishiraj, I don't know if I pronounce it properly, poet teacher at Instituto Cervantes as well, and translator of this poem cannot join us, but his or colleague, Devika Bakshi, will read it on his behalf. Shukriya, Devika.
I'd like to thank Isabel and Maria and all of my fellow translators. And I'd like to say just a couple of words in Urdu for the people who are listening to this version. Okay? मुझे माफ़ कीजिएगा, मैं मधुबन जी के अंदाज़ में ये कविता नहीं पढ़ पाऊँगी, ठीक है? मगर मैं ये समझती हूँ कि हिंदुस्तानी मेरी भी ज़बान है, तो मैं नस्तलिख नहीं पढ़ सकती, मगर फिर भी आपके लिए उर्दू में कविता पढ़ूँगी. मुझे बस इतना काफ़ी है. अगर मैं खुदा होता और मेरे पास राज होता तो मैं तुम जैसा ही एक वजूद बनाता. मैं उसे परखता जैसे नान बाई रोटी को परखते हैं, यानी मुंह से. और अगर वो जायका तुम्हारे जायके जैसा होता, यानी तुम्हारी खुशबू जैसा, और तुम्हारा तरीका मुस्कुराने का, खामोश रहने का, मेरा हाथ मजबूती से थामने का और बोसा लेने का बग़ैर कोई तकलीफ़ दिए, इस बात का तो मुझे यकीन है. मैं बहुत ध्यान रखता हूँ जब तुम्हें चूमता हूँ. फिर अगर मैं खुदा होता तो तुम्हें बार बार दोहराता, हमेशा एक जैसी और हमेशा नई. कभी ना थकता उस यकसां खेल से और ना ही छोड़ता उस हस्ती को जो तुम थीं, उसके लिए जो तुम होने वाली थीं अभी अभी. शायद मैं वाजी ना हो सका, मगर कहना चाहता हूँ कि अगर मैं खुदा होता तो भरपूर कोशिश करता कि आंखेल गोन्सालेस बनूं, ताकि तुम्हें वैसे चाह सकूं जैसे चाहता हूं, ताकि सब्र से इंतज़ार कर सकूं कि तुम खुद को हर दिन दोबारा बनाओ, कि तुम हर सुबह चौंका दो नई पैदा हुई रोशनी को अपनी रोशनी से और हटा दो वो नादीदा पर्दा जो जुदा करता है ख्वाब को ज़िंदगी से. मुझे ज़िंदा कर दो अपने लफ्ज़ से, एक खुशबाश लाजर की तरह. मैं अभी भी भीगा हुआ सायों और काहिली से, हैरान और महव उस सब की तमाशाई जो तुम मेरे साथ मिलकर वापस लाती और बचाती हो, हरकत देती हो, छोड़ देती हो. जब बाद में खामोश हो जाती हो, मैं तुम्हारी खामोशी सुनता हूँ सितारों की झुरमुट. तुम मौजूद हो, मैं तुम पर ईमान रखता हूँ, तुम हो, मुझे बस इतना काफ़ी है.
Thank you so much to our translators. What a beauty, no? Listening to this kind of, all these different languages at the same place, at the same time. So we are going to start with a short, brief roundtable with our main characters at this moment. The poetry of Ángel González, as our director mentioned, may appear simple, but there is a great depth in every verse. It has been very moving listening to all of you. Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about the work behind the 7 poems featured on the book. So I would like to start with the first question. And I would like to ask you if you could share with us the main challenges you have faced in bringing the words and voice of Ángel González into your language. We can start with Devika, for example.
Sorry about that. I was really thrilled to do this translation. I thought it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the original poems. I think I'm not trying to be cute when I say this, but I think the main challenge for me was how similar Spanish and English appear to be. Even though rhythmically and in terms of meaning, they don't quite correspond. And so I was very pleased to read the Urdu translation because I actually think it's a superior translation. It retains more of the flavor of the original, I think. But I really enjoyed the challenge of translating these poems. I think that answers your question.
Was there any other challenge that you faced?
Hundreds of challenges. Shubro is very familiar with most of them because I was constantly calling him and saying, how do I solve this? There were particularly some plays on words that I was very sad to lose. And then some I retained which I felt interfered with the rhythm of the original but maybe kept a little bit of the double meaning, like in the poem you just heard. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so it's also the philosophy behind translation, I think, which comes into play here. I'm a stickler for following the original as much as possible, which is not really the best approach. I'm not saying it's the best approach, but I think sometimes it works, sometimes it's detrimental to the translation. But the good thing was, and that's why I mentioned the parody and the humorous touches, the jocose touches at the beginning, because Marathi poetry has a long tradition of such poetry, and the rhythms, in fact, the way I read out this poem, I wanted to just mention it. When I heard Shubro recite the poem, I thought it was a different poem altogether. I don't know if you saw it phonetically or whether the oral effect was visible, but he read it out more as a heartfelt poem, whereas I read it out in a more sort of, with a lighter touch. Now, what was Ángel González's intention, we don't know. And I think it was a mix of both. He wanted, because in the latter phase of his poetry, he deliberately took a turn towards colloquial language. So that's for sure. And he wanted to play with words and bring out the humor in the poetry. This was a Spanish poetic scene, which was, as Shubro also expounded upon it, it was dominated by serious poets, and serious in the sense of poets who were brooding and melancholic, and either they were writing about poesia social, they were writing about social themes, or they were writing about their inner lives. So there wasn't much of humor, or there wasn't a sonrisa there.
I must add, Ángel González did not forget the tradition that comes from Quevedo.
Absolutely, exactly, yeah. So the conceptista tradition which comes from Quevedo, and he builds upon it in a very, it's very difficult to do actually, as Shubro, we have a poet here in our midst, he'll let us do it. It's very difficult to write a good humorous poem. I wouldn't be able to pull it off. I don't think I can. And to pull off a translation is also is no mean task. There are lots of hits and misses in my translation. I think more misses than hits. But there are certain things I'm happy about, and I'll just mention them because we are on this topic. So, for example, if you turn your book to this poem, it's a short poem called, just wait a sec, it's towards the end, Ja Nada Aura. It's called Ja Nada Aura. This is on page 94, is the Spanish version, right? Now, if you see, even if you don't know Spanish, and most of you know Spanish, the ones in the audience, but you see, look at the first line, no? Largo es el arte, la vida en cambio corta como un cuchillo. So, la vida en cambio corta como un cuchillo, there's an enjambment and encabalgamiento there, which is deliberate. Korta here can function as an adjective, like life is short, and it also functions as a verb, as someone is rightly pointing out in the first row. That was a challenge, and I wanted to somehow work my way around it because I thought there would be a solution. And the solution I came up with, and I would like to know how it has been done in Bengali also, because I can't, as only a translation I'm going to access as such. But I have done it as Ayushya Matra Kshanabhangur. Kshanabhangur is like momentary, it is not, it's temporary, fleeting, transient. But I have written Tsaku Sarkha Chirinara. Now Tsaku is Kuchillo. So Korta Kamun Kuchillo, I have retained the phonetic, the prosody there, right? So it's Tsaku Sarkha Chirinara. That alliteration comes through in Marathi as well. And when you say Tsaku Sarkha Chirinara, it means that it cuts like a knife. So I somehow worked my way to this. I don't know if it's the best way to translate it, but it's an innovative way of doing it, and that's where I come into the, I'll just conclude with this, I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time. Walter Benjamin's theory of translation, and there are two words in German now which I want to mention here. One is Ähnlichkeit, which is similarity. The other is Verwandtschaft, which is kinship, right? So are we going for Semejanza, similarity, or Verwandtschaft, which is parentesco, or kinship? So I've tried to work my translation in that mold towards finding affinities which can be explored between the languages, commonalities and convergences. This is one approach. I'm not saying it's the best approach, and that's the approach I've taken, and it is obviously comes with challenges, and you're inevitably bound to, the loss of meaning is something you have to deal with as a translator. But I think it's worthwhile, because if it weren't for translations, I wouldn't have read, say, Sław Miłosz or all these great Polish poets, for example, right? Or even Thomas Tranströmer. I remember in 2003 I read Thomas Tranströmer in English translation. It was just fascinating. So yeah, so just to conclude with Octavio Paz's quote, what gets translated is poetry. So inevitably the poem has some literary merit. It will come through in the original, in the target language, in the lingua destinataria as well. So that's all from my side. Sorry, Shubhro, please.
It's okay. They have said everything. I just want to point out one word in this poem that we all read. There is a word in Spanish, it's pan. And all of the translators, they have translated in Hindi, they translated bread. She translated, Madhuban translated naan. And Marathi word, what is bread? You kept it bread. But in Bangla, there's a strange word that comes from Portuguese. We call it pão roti. So for us, we differentiate the Indian bread and the Western bread with these two words. So I kept that word there, the Portuguese word, pão, instead of pan. These types of things were there, but as a whole, I am not a good translator like my colleagues are here. When I translate, my language teacher self takes a big toll on me, and I tried to smooth out all the edges, but it's difficult. Only a Bengali reader can tell if the poem reads smoothly or not.
Well, I guess you know this book, Sympathy for the Traitor. You can imagine who the traitor is. Translation Manifesto. The author is Mark Polizzotti. And in this book, he reflects on various questions related to translation. For instance, what it means for a translation to be faithful or unfaithful, whether it is inevitable to lose, actually you were talking already about this, to lose something in translation, and whether translation involves only loss, or on the contrary, may also entail gains. I would like to ask you, do you feel like traitors, especially when you are translating poetry, which is even more complicated than other genres. So are you traitors or not?
I don't know. Maybe you are not traitors, they're vandals, maybe. I don't know what is worse. But yes, I mean, I think you have to depart from the premise that there is going to be a loss of meaning. And unfortunately, so I'll give you another example. Once I translated from Spanish tremulo, un impulso tremulo. I love the word. I love the adjective. But I would never translate it in English as tremulous. I did it as quivering because I thought quivering gives more of a sensation of trembling, right? I don't know. And the original poet just discarded it. He's like, no, you will maintain it as it is. And so, I mean, if Ángel González were here, and I think in this sense, Devika was the bravest of the lot. I think she should speak now because his poems have been translated into English already. There's been a fantastic translation by Donald Walsh, Harsh World and Other Poems. I think that's the title of the book. So in that sense, I think for us, we were free in that sense because there are no translations into Marathi. So you are not only traitors in that sense, but you're also, I don't know, pioneers or pioneering traitors, right? Like filibuster, I don't know what to say. Yeah, Devika, please.
I knew that there were other translations of this work, and I just made a decision not to look at them because there are two things I didn't want to be thinking about that translation when I did built my own relationship with the poem. I'm not a poet. Akshay is a literary translator. Shubro is a poet. So for me, I really come at this as a reader. And more than vandalism or being a traitor, it sort of felt like I was playing with somebody else's toys, which can be quite a pleasant sensation. And the stakes were quite low because this is not going to be the official translation of Ángel González's poems. I just want to point out a couple of things that some compromises or some bets that I made. Some I'm unhappy with and some I'm happy with. So for example, people who listened to the poem in English might have noticed that there is what I feel is quite an awkward turn of phrase here, which says, never tiring of that identical game, right? And earlier I mentioned that there was often a play on words that I wanted to retain, and it was impossible to do it. One of them was cuts like a knife, which Akshay talked about, and the other one is in the penultimate poem, which is cuarto, which means cuarto means the fourth, but it also means room. And because it goes on to say that, ¿qué dice? ¿No está amueblado? Ajá, el cuarto es conocido, lo que pasa es que no tiene muebles, which literally means the room is familiar, but it doesn't have any furniture. But you could also translate it, and it also means that the fourth, as in the fourth stage of life, is well known, but it's empty. There's nothing in it. So I went with the second one, and I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the fact that I gave up the cuts like a knife, though I think it might have been a better choice. The one that I'm unhappy with is the one in the poem that you heard, which said, never tiring of that identical game, which sounds very weird when I'm reading it, but I didn't want to let go of the fact that it was a game of identity. In the original Spanish, it's un juego idéntico. And it was a game of identity, and I didn't want to let go of that word, idéntico.
How did you do it in Bengali? El cuarto es conocido, if I may ask you.
I did it like the fourth because it's difficult to. I did the knife thing. I did it the way you did. I'm glad that you did it. I also did the same thing.
This was unplanned, so
it is.
We are happier for it.
Yeah. But in case of the cuarto, I couldn't do anything. I had to go for the fourth because if the most challenging part of any translation, if there is a word play inside the original, that most of the times that cannot be transferred to any other language.
So, but how is it? How does it read? Could you just read out those lines?
30, fourth one.
No, the next line, the last two lines I meant.
That's great because this table doesn't need a moderator at all.
চতুর্থটি সবারই জানা, শুধু তার মধ্যে আসবাবপত্র প্রায় থাকেই না. The fourth one, everybody knows the fourth stage. There's no muebles.
No, I'll just finish with this. I was also, in fact, in the last final version, I somehow sought a solution for this. How I did it was, obviously I did it as fourth. चौथा क्षण ही माहित आहे. El cuarto segundo. The fourth second is well known, or the fourth phase is well known, right? But then I mentioned, I did it like फक्त एवढंच की ती खोली रिकामी असते. So I inserted room. Kholi is room in Marathi. So I did like the fourth phase is also empty. But what happened? But the thing is that this room is also, yeah. So I got the room in the last verse instead of the penultimate verse. Again, looks quite contrived, as you guys pointed out. It's not the best way to go about it, but then it makes for interesting roundtable discussions. That's all. So, Isabel, please.
Subra, you didn't answer the question. Are you a traitor when you translate poetry or not?
Well, I am a traitor. I confess. Yes, indeed. Because of these, well, translation is always a loss, but it's more than that loss. We gain a lot because we all of us here, we read a lot of translated work, and for me, as a matter of fact, I started learning Spanish because of the Spanish-speaking poets whom I read in translation. So I gained something from that, and I tried to, when I translate, my main problem is this, my language teaching self that imposes too much on me. I just leave my poet aside. I don't know why, and while it might be the other way around while writing. So I can say, yes, I am a traitor.
Well, Dhanyavad, gracias. Thank you very much. Sukriya, thank you for being here with us, sharing your experience. Yes.
Just, I want to thank all of you, Isabel, Maria, Akshaya, and this production team. This is a lovely production. We're all now panicked. You have questions.
I mean, I'm absolutely not. I have the traduttore, traidore, this famous ancient saying. Then there's another one which we always say that translation is like a woman. If she's faithful, she's not beautiful, and she's beautiful, she's not faithful. The most patriarchal saying I have ever heard. So I don't agree with both of these things. Translators are neither traitor nor faithful to the way they compare it with women. Translator is a creator. That's all. That's how I learned while translating Don Quixote, that you are a creator. You rewrite the work because you are putting yourself in place of the writer, and all the time you are trying to say, and of course fighting with the writer, with the author, because why have you done this? So now how am I going to translate it? This used to come to me all the time when I was doing Don Quixote. But my question is, with the poem which Maria read, there is one sentence, one stanza rather. It says, in the second, si yo fuese Dios, podría repetirte y repetirte siempre la misma y siempre diferente. It's only in the English translation because I don't understand how it was in Bengali or Marathi. Hindi has directly translated it as Dorata, Met mein Dorata. Whereas the English translation, I think, is the most successful because it says remake. I would have made you and remade you. I think that is the one which falls in the place. I don't remember how it was in Urdu. I think also Dorata. But the translator, what the translator in Hindi and Urdu has missed is repetirte.
In Bangla, I did it, Ami tomake te bar bar toiri kortam, as if I made you repeat it.
So I thought that was the thing. So that was something which I think was the correct choice. And if you go, I mean, that is the problem if you have translations in front of you. When you read a poem, especially you read a poem as it is. If you read it in English, you will read it as it is, and in Spanish as it is. So, therefore, I think the translator's selection of words is the central to this whole process. How do you select? I mean, dictionary does not help you at all. Dictionary will not help you.
No, that's it.
Well, anyway, I will take a full class in literature.
No, in fact, I have to mention someone here, my very dear friend Milind Sant, who helped me immensely in these translations. I ran them by him, and he's a very voracious reader in Marathi especially, which is another unique profile because he reads more in Marathi than any other language, which cannot be said about me. In fact, I would say it's like about a third language I read in after Spanish and English due to various professional reasons. Sometimes he just used to tell me that this word reads oddly. And then my counter to that was, how do you feel it? And this sounds very hackneyed and cliched, but it's actually, I think, I don't know if you agree, but it's, sometimes you just feel a word. It just comes to you and you can't explain it. And that comes through voracious reading of poetry, I would say, in the first place. I mean, this will come only after you read a lot of poems in both languages. So, in whatever I've read in Marathi, whatever little I've read, mostly I've read poetry. So that sort of sense comes, and to quote W.S. Merwin, a very good translator and poet himself, you have to think like a poet, although you might not be a published poet in that sense, right? I mean, neither Devika and I can claim to be great poets of any sort. Shubhro is a different case. He's an established poet, which is a different case, an established poet translating another established poet. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this is a short one. I think I must compliment Devika because your translation was very nice. I'm from a Urdu-speaking background, except for one word which you said, kavita, is that should be shairi. I mean, that happens, but other than that, your pronunciation, what we say, lehja, was absolutely accurate and very authentic. And I think the verses which you read in Urdu, that gave the entire gist of the content of the poem. And that is something which is very good, which I still say, कि शायरी उर्दू में ही सबसे अच्छी होती है. So, yes, I mean, it was really good, and especially, I mean, it's rarely that one gets to hear the pronunciation. You know, there are certain sounds which come from the throat. You know, like kaf. So here they say ka, kaf. We say kaf, ka, like that. So I think your pronunciation was fabulous. It was really good. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Last comment, please. Do you want to say anything else before continuing?
Hello? Yes. I just want to say one thing about the previous subject, about the choice of words that you asked about. There's one I'm really proud of. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to share it with you. The first poem in the set is called Para que yo me llame Ángel González. And there is, if you look at page 24, I think 6 lines from the end, it says, un escombro tenaz. And this is exactly an example of what Akshay was saying earlier. If you look at it in the dictionary, tenaz is tenacious. So the obvious translation would have been tenacious debris, but I felt that lost some of the flavor, the impact, the rhythm, so I translated it as dogged. And every time I read it, I feel extremely pleased with myself. So anyway, I'm happy about that word choice.
Thank you so much. Now we are going to invite the design team to come to the stage and the illustration, please. And thank you for being with us. So we all know the importance of the words, but what about where and how those words are placed and printed? Many of us, we love books not only for what they say, but also for what they may be, crafted pieces, art objects. Modestly, that is precisely what we have tried to achieve with this publication, a physical form that complements and highlights the words of Ángel González. So please allow me to introduce the people who has made possible the book you have on your hands right now, and if you don't have it, you can grab a copy over there. We have with us the Design Village team, Subik, Mukherjee, and Srinidhi Sritaran, project managers of these book projects, Anayur Roy Chowdhury, book designer, and Anusha Daban, illustrator and designer. Don't forget to enjoy the original illustrations created for the book, which are displayed around the hall. And I'm going to start with a question for Anusha. So could you please tell us about what techniques and creation process you follow for the book illustrations?
Yeah. Hello. So I think when I don't understand life and things, I go for honesty. So, and of course, I've been thinking what is something relevant to say in front of an audience that has gathered to look at this book. And I've been thinking, what is the right way? So I know the feeling, but I probably don't have the right words to put that feeling out. And I've been trying to process and think, what is the right phrase for it? So I think in the process that I sort of took, the only thing that makes sense to me right now, or what I would sort of call what has come out, is just that it is just an attempt. And when I say attempt, and it's a very common word that all of us use, so it can sound like I gave a very big build-up and then said nothing. But I think that's one thing that justifies what I went through when I looked at this. So when I say an attempt, the attempt was at having a conversation with this person. So something that I tried to do deliberately was to not go and read a bio about the poet. Something that I've been doing in my life and with people that I try to figure or make sense of life with. The idea is that you're always asking people. So if Ananyo tells me something, I'll be like, do you mean this? And then Ananyo says, no, I mean something else. And then I ask Ananyo, do you mean that? And I think the illustrations that you see is that transaction, is that conversation, is that process of me trying to read all of this and trying to have a conversation with Ángel about, did you mean this or did you mean that? And I think it was a wonderful sort of a companion in the idea of the way life happens, in between overwhelm, in between happy days, in between not so happy days. Very interestingly, I would land on poems about love the day I was thinking about love, or land on poems about the universe and the way the world is, where he talks about animals and what do humans learn from animals as storytelling, on days where it made sense. Or maybe I was pushing it, I don't know. But I think the entire process was about not trying to make a representation of what the poem was, or not try to illustrate components of it, but I would wait for one of the lines to touch me in a way something else has never touched. And for me, the way of doing that was because I could read the English and the Hindi translations. So I was moving between those two translations and trying to just watercolor out the conversation. So I think that was the process. Something that I discovered at the beginning, or something that we did not try to over-engineer, was this idea of each of the illustrations look very different, so much so that people who have seen my work previously are saying that, is that also your work, or is that also your work? And I think that is what the poet has given me. I'm drawing things that I'm drawing in styles, for the lack of a better word, in ways I was not drawing before. And I think more than them being watercolors with brushes and techniques, I think this describes the journey and the process.
Thank you so much. And please enjoy these wonderful illustrations. We are very happy to have it here with us. Well, design team, is the first time that you have been involved in a project with several languages, like this one?
I mean, hello. For me, it's the first time working with a lot of languages which I don't speak. So I've worked with Hindi, I've worked with Bengali as well. So the main caveat I faced was to keep the essence alive, because like poetry and illustrations and all of this is art, and art is like sacred to me. I've been appreciating poems, I've been appreciating music and art since I was a kid. And like my main objective here was to just like make the poem flow seamlessly. Like when you're turning pages or whatever, like if you lose the flow of the poem, it doesn't feel like a poem anymore. It feels like something which is like completely alien to the thing which was there before. So like maintaining that and nailing that was essentially the hardest part for me. And I think I did a pretty good job.
What about you, Subik and Srinidhi?
No, I definitely agree with that. Like one of the first things that we wanted to keep in mind was that we wanted to maintain the sanctity of the poems as well. And all the works done by Anusha were only there to complement it, and itself, the whole book itself became a piece of art. At the Design Village, as a part of the Design Village, we have a small entity called the Design Cell, where we are working with a lot of organizations and clients, where we are working on projects which are bilingual, multilingual in some nature. And it is always a challenge, but it's a fun challenge for us to like take on. And every time we are doing something like that, there are things that come up maybe like 2 days before the final submission or 3 days before the final submission, which kind of like changes the complete direction of the project as well. And something like that similarly happened in this book as well. But it was definitely a fun experience, so yeah.
I completely agree with that, and I really feel that initially finding the right font that could maintain the sanctity of each poem in the different scripts was also one of the things that was really intriguing. So when he says that the process of working with different languages and different scripts and trying to maintain that balance is something that was really interesting to work on with. Just in linguistics, how each language has different structures, morphosyntactically and literally. Similarly, working in this project with each fragment of that illustration, making the right balance of it, interacting with that script, whether it is Devanagari, Nastaliq, or the Latin scripts, was a complete experience in itself.
Could you share a little bit more about the particularities of working in a book where illustration and poetry come together? Can you tell us a little bit more about this combination and the challenges that you face?
I mean, if I would recommend something, it would be to like completely immerse yourself in the process, because if you are like not mentally there, and it may or may not work out. Because when I was working, like I was listening to like music, I guess, and I was like completely immersed in it. Nothing would stop me from doing it. And I just sat for hours and set everything right. So the way the poem flowed, the way the illustrations are flowing with the poem and everything, you have to like keep an eye on that. So.
This was a completely iterative process, the whole team. It wasn't like Anusha was working in one island or the design team was working separately. It was a collaborative process. We were meeting each other like every week. We were trying to understand how can we incorporate the different illustrations. There were multiple iterations that we took as to what the illustrations could look like, or when one illustration was made, how could that one illustration be incorporated in that one poem. We came up with like multiple like options. We even shared with your team, and we showed you like multiple different directions that we could take in. And even like finally, after coming to like one final direction, we decided that no, probably that wasn't the best way to go about it, and then we extrapolated from that as well and created something new altogether. So it was like not something that any one of us was doing individually, but it was like all coming together and trying to understand that, okay, maybe this is the way we can go about it. Even the cover of the book, for that matter, we had so many different iterations coming along. We were going on a completely different tangent when we realized that maybe this book doesn't require all of that. When we had originally given you the different kind of proposals, we had a lot of different ideas of different techniques that we could use in terms of how the look and feel of the book could be. But at the end, we realized that the artworks and the poems in itself just interacting with each other. It's just a conversation between the two of them, as Anusha mentioned, like her response to the poems.
I'm stealing the thunder of the designers, but that just reminded me of, so what we were trying to figure in the beginning was that it could be one approach to create a version of the illustration for each translation. And it could be another approach to actually use frames and fragments from the meta illustration into all the other translations as well. But I think that particular process took us to a space where, and just fun fact, internally we were referring to all the smaller illustrations that you see as babies of the larger illustration, which come with the other languages. And I think that was one space where we felt that approach was finally doing justice to also talking about the translations equally, while it tries to convert or respond to the poem through one major illustration. So I think the babies thing was something that we were sort of really amazed by ourselves, because we also wanted each translation to get that illustration with itself of its own. Yeah.
Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I was just, again, flipping through the pages, and I really feel like each script sort of is visually so different that it interacts with the same kind of art in a very different way. What I mean to say is that when I look at the pages of this book with the different kind of scripts, it's a very different emotion that is being evoked with each of the script as we pass through them. So that is very experientially rich. And I feel like working with different languages, that is the beauty of it.
Yes, because for us, for example, the scripts, the different scripts for us are like images, actually, no? Because we didn't get the meaning, we can read it. So for me, there is a quite a strong graphic content in the script, which makes the publication quite special in this sense. We are collaborating, we are contributing to linguistic diversity, but at the same time, I think that as a graphic objects, it's quite beautiful, no? Appealing. We have learned, I mean, as Instituto Cervantes team, we have learned a lot with this publication, with this process. You help us a lot to understand as well all the work that is behind a publication. What recommendation would you share for publication of this kind, for future projects, based on our experience?
I personally feel like a project like this definitely requires a lot of more iterations. It's a complete, as I was mentioning, it's an iterative process. I'm sure Anusha would have loved to like explore a few more directions as well.
I would have loved to meet all the translators in the beginning, and I don't know, spend time understanding the words or the specificities that they were talking about, because I think that exchange of the process could also probably bring something new, just as a possibility.
Surely. We had a meeting with the translators, but that was quite late in the whole process. But after having a conversation like that, that also kind of like gave us a new direction of how everybody was treating the same poem in their own way. And that's something similar that they were also mentioning right now. That so that kind of a to and fro could actually make this process even more enriching in a way that, as you were mentioning, that Cervantes also learned, that we were also learning as to how can we actually go about treating the same thing in like multiple different ways. So that's probably the thing, like more discussions, a little more time, that would be something that we will keep in mind, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, that in each language, different words have different literal meanings, and just gauging that essence of it and then drawing the illustrations, that is a whole process in itself, like she mentioned, so yeah.
Well, do you want to share anything else with us? No? To conclude, just 3 things. First, thanks again to the translator, the Design Village team, and the director, and my colleagues at Instituto Cervantes for making both this publication and this event possible. Thank you so much. Second, you can get a copy of the book, please, if you haven't done it yet. And third, inspired by Ángel González's poem called Hay 3 momentos graves más el cuarto, 3 critical moments plus the 4th. Please, let's enjoy the pause until the room becomes empty. Muchas gracias, Dani Abad. Thank you very much.